July 4th, 2013, 1 week after the massacre on Elmora Avenue. Baltimore Police Commissioner Anthony Batts stands in front of cameras and does something no Baltimore Police Commissioner has ever done before. He names a public enemy number one. His name is Daryl Anderson. Batts says, "He's a thug. He's a violent person in Baltimore. I'm not trying to hide anything." The department posts Anderson's face everywhere. Dreadlocks, tattoos across the forehead. A man who has been convicted 4 times as an adult, walked free 4 times, and who is now somewhere in a city of 600,000 people with a gun and no intention of going back to prison. The U.S. Marshals are called in. The FBI issues multi-state alerts. Anderson has told associates he would rather die than be taken. And Baltimore, bloody and fed up, watches. But here's the thing about naming a public enemy number one. It implies there was a moment when the enemy was unknown, when he was still a secret, when the system had not yet had the chance to see what he was and decide what to do about it. That moment never existed with Daryl Anderson. The system had seen him 4 times, 4 convictions, 4 suspended sentences. 4 times a judge looked at what was standing in front of him and decided the appropriate response was to send the man home. He went home, he killed people, and then the city held a press conference about it. This is the story of a man the system built and then called a monster. It is the story of Jenny Sherd and Michelle Hitchens, who died on a Baltimore porch because of what the system chose not to do. And it is the story of the machine still running that is doing the same thing right now to the next name that has not yet made the news. Baltimore in the summer of 2013 was a city drowning in its own violence. Homicides were climbing past 200 for the year before July even arrived. The city's relationship with its poorest neighborhoods had been shaped by decades of redlining, blockbusting, and deliberate municipal disinvestment that had concentrated poverty in the east and west side corridors in ways that the war on drugs and the subsequent mass incarceration wave had made catastrophically worse. The neighborhoods most affected by violent crime were the same neighborhoods that had been stripped of manufacturing jobs, of investment, of the school resources that might have given the children growing up in them a reason to believe the legitimate world had something to offer. Into that landscape, the Black guerrilla family had embedded itself so deeply in both the streets and the prison system that the line between the two had essentially dissolved. 2 months before the Elmora Avenue massacre, in April 2013, federal authorities had unsealed an indictment that revealed what the BGF had built inside the Baltimore City Detention Center. And the revelation was so staggering that it temporarily eclipsed every other story the city had to tell about itself. 44 people were indicted, 27 of them were corrections officers. The indictment documented a criminal enterprise inside a correctional facility so complete that describing it as corruption does not capture the scale of it. At the center of it was Tavon White, an inmate who had been locked up since 2009 awaiting trial for attempted murder and who had used his time behind bars to build something that bore no resemblance to incarceration, as most people understand the word. White was recorded on an FBI wiretap in January 2013. The recording was played at press conferences and in courtrooms and on television news broadcasts across Baltimore. His voice was calm and unambiguous. "This is my jail, you understand that? I'm dead serious. I make every final call in this jail. Nothing goes past me, not a warden, not a shift supervisor, an inmate in a maximum security detention facility, claiming ownership of the institution that was supposed to hold him. The claims were not empty. Federal agents documented that White had impregnated 4 female corrections officers while incarcerated, one of them twice, 5 children total. 2 officers had his name tattooed on their bodies. 1 received a diamond ring, 4 others received luxury cars, Mercedes-Benz, and BMW vehicles purchased with drug money that had been laundered through the jail's informal economy. Officers smuggled contraband in their underwear, their shoes, their hair, cell phones, prescription pills, heroin, tobacco. White claimed that in a slow month, he was generating $16,000 in profit from inside a jail cell. The corrections officers he had seduced and compromised had become the distribution network for a drug operation operating inside the facility that was supposed to be holding them all. The BGF had not stumbled into this arrangement. Federal agents discovered that the organization had a specific playbook for recruiting corrections officers. Target women with low self-esteem, with financial vulnerability, with specific physical attributes that made them susceptible to the romantic attention of men who had been trained to identify and exploit those vulnerabilities. The system was taught and practiced. The outcomes were documented in the federal indictment that Gary Maynard, Maryland's Secretary of Public Safety and Correctional Services, stood in front of cameras and called embarrassing. He said it was totally on him. He promised a polygraph test for every employee. He did not promise that anything would actually change in the institutional conditions that had made all of it possible. And while the Baltimore City Detention Center was consuming every oxygen molecule in the city's news cycle, the BGF's soldiers on the street were doing what soldiers on the street do. Darrell Anderson was one of them. Darrell Anderson's criminal history is the most damning indictment in this entire story, and it is an indictment not of Anderson alone, but of every judge who looked at what he was and decided the appropriate response was to suspend the sentence and let him go. He first appears in the criminal record in 1998. He is 15 years old. He is charged with attempted first-degree murder, use of a handgun in a crime of violence, assault, and intimidating a witness. That combination of charges, attempted murder and witness intimidation at 15 years old, describes someone who already understands the criminal ecosystem completely. The case is dismissed. He walks. September 2003. He is 16 years old. Police find him crouched in the back seat of a car with a smashed window, a blaring alarm, and broken glass covering the floor. They ask if he is armed. He tells them yes. They recover a .38 caliber semi-automatic handgun from his front pocket. He is convicted. He is sentenced to 3 years in prison. The judge suspends all but 5 days. He walks. 2 years later, another gun, possession of a firearm by a person under 21. His second conviction as an adult. He is sentenced to 4 years. He is released on mandatory supervision in February 2007. 5 months after that release, in June 2007, he robs a corner grocery store on Chesterfield Avenue at gunpoint. Armed robbery. His third conviction as an adult. He is sentenced to 12 years. The judge suspends all but 3. By December 2009, he is out again. Then the stabbing, Club K West, 21st Street, 2010. Anderson approaches a couple who are dancing. He takes his shirt off. He punches Gerald Thomas in the head. The bouncers intervene. Anderson runs. Thomas realizes he has been stabbed 6 times. The wound to his back is so deep that his lung collapses. Thomas nearly dies. Anderson is charged with attempted murder. He pleads down to first-degree assault, his 4th conviction as an adult. In February 2011, he is sentenced to 13 years in prison. The judge suspends everything except the time he has already served. He walks again. 4 convictions: gun possession, armed robbery, assault resulting in a collapsed lung, 4 times in front of a judge. 4 times, the judge looks at what Daryl Anderson is and decides the appropriate response is to send him home. 4 times, he walks out of a courthouse and back into Baltimore. 18 months after the stabbing conviction, Derek Gamble is shot 12 times outside a bar in Baltimore County. He is found slumped in his driver's seat, blood covering the floor mats. He is 31 years old. The case goes cold. No arrests. No witnesses come forward. Nobody connects Daryl Anderson to it for over a year. 11 months after Derek Gamble dies, Tierra Fallon walks up to a porch on Elmora Avenue and says 4 words, and Jenny Sherd dies on the steps where she was sitting. 3 murders, 4 convictions, 4 suspended sentences. The arithmetic is not complicated. The system had every opportunity to do something different and chose not to 4 times, and the cost of those choices was paid by Jenny Sherd and Michelle Hitchens and Derek Gamble, none of whom had any connection to Daryl Anderson before the moment he pointed a gun at them. The manhunt that followed the Elmora Avenue shootings was the most public and most intensive Baltimore has seen in years. Police Commissioner Anthony Batts went to the cameras on July 4th, 2013, a week after the massacre, and used a designation that the department had never deployed before. He named Daryl Anderson public enemy number 1 in the city of Baltimore. He called Anderson a thug and a violent person and said the police were not trying to hide the fact that he was a gang member. Lieutenant Colonel Daryl D'Souza was even more direct. He's somewhere. He thinks he can hide. We're going to find him. The U.S. Marshals were brought in. The FBI issued multi-state alerts. Anderson was considered to be carrying at least 2 firearms at all times and had reportedly told associates that he would rather die than go back to prison. His network, the same BGF infrastructure that had been running drugs and contraband through the Baltimore City Detention Center, moved him. He was not just a man on the run. He was a man with an organization behind him, with safe houses and contacts and the kind of loyalty that a gang with the BGF's reach can provide to one of its valued enforcers. 20 days passed. Then a tip came in. Birmingham, Alabama. U.S. Marshals set up surveillance outside an apartment complex. They watched a car with Maryland plates pull in and back into a parking space. Someone inside the apartment peered through the blinds. They knew the police were there. A woman walked out and told the marshals he was not there. The marshals did not move. Moments later, the apartment door opened again. Daryl Anderson stepped out, hands up, dreadlocks, forehead tattoos, exactly the man they had come for. Inside the apartment, agents found a .40 caliber Glock and 2 bulletproof vests. Maryland U.S. Marshal Johnny Hughes said in his statement that the suspect never stood a chance. He was extradited back to Baltimore. While he was in custody, awaiting trial on the Elmora Avenue murders, investigators finished the work that connected him to Derek Gamble's killing in Baltimore County. Ballistics, timelines, the pattern of associates and locations. He was charged with first-degree premeditated murder and Gamble's death as well. The trials came in sequence. December 2014, Baltimore County Circuit Court. Guilty, first-degree premeditated murder in the Gamble killing. March 16, 2015, life in prison without parole, plus more than 35 years. Anderson sat quietly throughout the proceedings. The judge remarked that he had been a perfect gentleman throughout the trial. 8 days later, March 24th, 2015, Baltimore City, the Elmora Avenue trial. Tierra Fallon sat beside him as a co-defendant. She had no prior criminal record. She was a mother of 4 who had turned a personal argument into a killing spree because She had access to a man the system had trained into a weapon and then released repeatedly into the streets of her city. The jury convicted both of them. Anderson received 2 counts of second-degree murder, 6 counts of attempted murder, 8 counts of conspiracy to commit murder, and multiple handgun violations. At sentencing, the victims' families filled one side of the courtroom. Fallen's family filled the other, her relatives pleading for leniency, describing her as a good person who made a mistake, one uncle proposing that she be made an indentured servant to the victims' families rather than sent to prison. Anderson's side of the courtroom was empty. He had asked his family not to come. His mother had been too upset at the Baltimore County sentencing. Judge Gail Racine listened to all of it. Life in prison, plus 240 years for both defendants. Anderson thanked the judge, rose to be shackled, turned toward the gallery where State's Attorney Marilyn Mosby was sitting in the front row, and flipped her off. Middle finger extended, held there, looking directly at the prosecutor who had spent 2 years building the case against him. No remorse, no regrets. The gesture of a man who understood that what the system had done to him and what he had done in the space that system created was not a story that ended cleanly for anyone in that room. The second shooter has never been identified. He has never been charged. He stood on the sidewalk in front of a porch on Elmora Avenue on the evening of June 27, 2013, heard Tierra Fallon say 4 words and started shooting. He hit people. He walked away. He is still out there, still free, still unidentified after everything that has been written and investigated and litigated about that night. That fact is its own kind of statement about the limits of what justice looks like in practice versus what it looks like at a press conference. The witnesses who testified against Anderson and Fallon showed a kind of courage that the no-snitching culture of East Baltimore makes genuinely remarkable. They stood up in open court in front of 2 convicted killers and their attorney and whatever BGF presence existed in or near that courtroom, and they identified what they saw on Elmora Avenue. Marilyn Mosby praised them publicly, saying the city needed more of that courage if Baltimore was going to become safer. She was right. She was also asking people who had every reason to be afraid of exactly what happened after they testified to accept a level of personal risk that no one in her position had to accept. Some of those witnesses had to move after the trial, change their routines, look over their shoulders, because the second shooter is still out there, because the BGF is still operating, because testifying against a gang enforcer in open court in Baltimore in 2015 does not end when the verdict is read. Jenny Sherd was buried on July 3rd, 2013, 6 days after she died on those steps. New Baptist Missionary Calvary Church, at the edge of the block where she died. Hundreds packed the pews. Her mother, Rachel Williams, stood at the front and said, "The thing that does not fit into any sentencing memorandum or press release. She was like my baby girl, my 4th child. Of all my kids, there was something special about her." Jenny's older sister, Tanisha Coley, said what the whole church was thinking. Let this be an example that all this fighting and killing has to stop. This could have been prevented. It could have been prevented. Not by a single intervention, not by a single judge making a different decision in 2003 or 2007 or 2010, though any one of those decisions made differently might have changed what happened on Elmora Avenue. It could have been prevented by a system that took seriously what it was looking at each time Daryl Anderson stood in front of a judge. A 15-year-old charged with attempted murder and witness intimidation. A 16-year-old with a loaded .38 in his front pocket. A man who stabbed someone 6 times in a nightclub and collapsed his lung. Each of those moments was a door that the system could have closed, and each time it left the door open, and the people who eventually paid for that decision were not the judges who made it. The BGF itself, the organization that provided Anderson with his identity, his network, and the cover he needed to stay free for 20 days after the massacre, faced its own legal consequences from the Tavon White indictment. 40 defendants were eventually convicted in the detention center corruption case. White himself received 12 years in federal prison, a sentence that many observers found inadequate given the scope of what he had built and the damage his organization had done. He will be released eventually. The Baltimore City Detention Center itself was closed in July 2015 by Governor Larry Hogan, its buildings eventually demolished in 2021. The physical structure of the institution finally gone after decades of documented dysfunction. The corruption did not go with it. Organizations adapt. The BGF's presence in Maryland's correctional system did not end because one facility was closed and 40 people were convicted. Federal indictments against BGF members in other jurisdictions continued for years after 2013. The gang evolved, as every gang that has survived prosecution has always evolved, adjusting its methods and its structures while maintaining the core organizational reality that makes it useful to the men who depend on it and dangerous to everyone else. The Public Enemy program that Anthony Batts launched with Daryl Anderson's name and face in July 2013 worked. Anderson was caught in 20 days. Within the same summer, 2 more designated public enemies were arrested quickly, the strategy's rapid results generating praise from the state's attorney's office and from community leaders who had been demanding visible accountability for years. Batts used the designation at least several more times into 2014, and then in February 2014, the last designation. After that, nothing. No announcement, no explanation. The program just stopped. Whether it stopped because the political will to sustain it ran out, or because the rapid arrest successes it produced were not translating into the structural changes that might have reduced the pipeline of men like Anderson, or simply because the city moved on to the next crisis and the next initiative, nobody said publicly. The program that Marilyn Mosby called innovative simply faded, the way most things in Baltimore that work within the existing system eventually fade when the existing system's deeper dysfunctions reassert themselves. Daryl Anderson is serving consecutive life sentences in Maryland. He will die in prison. There is no version of the legal process available to him that produces a different outcome. He was convicted by a jury, sentenced by a judge, and his appeals have not changed the fundamental reality of his confinement. The machine that produced him is still running. The machine is worth naming specifically because it is more than the sentencing leniency that let him walk 4 times. It is the BGF and the specific infrastructure that organization provides for turning young men from Baltimore's most desperate neighborhoods into gang enforcers who are available for exactly the kind of assignment that Tierra Fallon brought to Anderson on the evening of June 27, 2013. It is the Baltimore City Detention Center and the 20 years of documented corruption that allowed a gang to run a correctional facility from the inside while the people responsible for operating that facility looked the other way, or took the money, or took the car, or got the tattoo on their bodies and let the drugs come through in their shoes. It is the specific poverty of East Baltimore and the specific institutional abandonment of the neighborhoods that produced both the Jenny Sherds and the Daryl Andersons, the young woman who died on the porch and the young man who shot her. Batts said it at the press conference where he named Anderson public enemy number 1 and the words are worth reading again. He's a thug. He's a violent person in Baltimore. From the information we have, yes, he's in a gang. I'm not trying to hide anything. That transparency was real. The manhunt that followed it was effective. The trial that came out of it produced convictions and life sentences. The justice that Marilyn Mosby said had been served was delivered in every technical sense the law provides. And Jenny Sherd is still dead. Michelle Hitchens is still dead. Derek Gamble is still dead. Sierra Williams wakes up every morning with a bullet scar on her skull and memories that a conviction cannot erase. The second man who stood next to Daryl Anderson on Elmora Avenue, the one who heard 4 words from Tierra falling and started shooting, has never been found. The system caught its public enemy number 1. It took 4 convictions and 3 murders and a 20-day manhunt across state lines to do it. It did not catch everything else. It has not fixed anything that produced him. And somewhere in Baltimore tonight, in the same geography that made Daryl Anderson what he was, the same machine is still running, still making the same products, still releasing them into the same streets and waiting to be surprised again by the same outcomes. That is the real legacy of the Elmora Avenue massacre. Not the life sentences, not the public enemy program, not the detention center indictments. The legacy is the machine that built a killer over 15 years of overlooked violence and suspended sentences and let him go 4 times. The machine that turned a correction facility into a criminal enterprise and took a decade to be dismantled. The machine that is still out there, still running, still producing the next name that will go up on the next public enemy press release. Daryl Anderson will die in prison. The machine will keep running after he is gone. And until someone decides to actually dismantle the machine, the names on those press releases will keep changing, and the porch on Elmora Avenue will keep having new addresses. The BGF's specific structure inside Baltimore's correctional system is worth understanding in more detail because it explains how a man like Daryl Anderson does not just exist as a violent individual, but as a functioning piece of an organizational machine that operates on both sides of the prison wall simultaneously. The Black Guerrilla family, as documented in the federal indictment and in the broader literature on the organization, had by 2013 developed a model for operating inside a correctional facility that was more sophisticated than anything the facility's official administration had built to counter it. The gang used what federal agents described as working men, trusted inmates with freedom to move around the facility, to function as the logistic infrastructure of a drug distribution and contraband smuggling operation. 95% of those working men, according to the indictment, were BGF members. They picked up contraband from specific locations inside the facility, transported it to buyers, operated as couriers in a building they effectively controlled. The corrections officers who had been compromised through the romantic and financial targeting program that the gang ran systematically were the supply chain's external connection, bringing product in through their clothing and their bodies and their personal effects. The phone calls that federal agents intercepted during the investigation document not just Tavon White's control of the facility, but the organizational discipline with which that control was maintained. White kept hierarchies. He had reporting structures. He had members who answered to him and who understood that the consequences for failing to follow his direction were real and enforced. The organizational capacity required to impregnate 4 women who worked in a maximum security facility, get 2 of them to permanently tattoo your name on their bodies, distribute luxury cars purchased with drug money, and generate $16,000 a month in profit from a jail cell. That capacity does not emerge spontaneously. It is built, taught, and maintained through the same combination of discipline and violence that makes the BGF effective in any environment it operates in. When members of that organization are released from custody and return to the streets, they carry the organizational identity, the relationships, and the specific skills the gang has developed inside with them. The prison and the street are not separate worlds for the BGF. They are the same world, operating in different physical spaces, connected by the same chain of command, the same revenue streams, and the same willingness to use violence as an enforcement tool. Daryl Anderson was a product of that world. He moved between custody and the street repeatedly, and each time he returned to the street, he returned as a more embedded and more trusted member of an organization that had specific use for what he was willing to do. Baltimore's homicide problem in 2013 was not just a BGF problem, but the BGF was not incidental to it either. The city recorded 233 homicides that year, a rate of approximately 37 per 100,000 residents that placed it among the most violent large cities in the United States. The neighborhoods with the highest homicide rates were the same neighborhoods with the highest poverty rates, the highest unemployment rates, and the highest concentrations of BGF activity. Those correlations do not establish causation in a simple direction. The poverty produces the gang activity as much as the gang activity produces the violence, and both of them are responses to the same structural conditions that have been shaping East and West Baltimore since the post-war years. The city had been losing population since its peak of 950,000 in 1950. By 2013, it was under 620,000 and still declining. The departure of residents, driven by the same combination of white flight, deindustrialization, and highway construction that had hollowed out urban cores across the mid-Atlantic region, had left behind a physical landscape of vacant lots, abandoned row houses, and commercial corridors that had never recovered from the departure of the retail and manufacturing activity that had once made them viable. The block where Jenny Sherd died was a block in a neighborhood that had been absorbing those departures for decades, maintaining a community life in the middle of structural conditions that made that community life increasingly difficult to sustain. The BGF did not create those conditions. The organization operated within them and exploited them in the same way that every prison gang or street gang documented in this series has operated within and exploited the specific structural conditions of the communities where it recruits. Young men in East Baltimore in the early 2000s who were considering their options were looking at a landscape in which the gang offered something real: income, structure, protection, and a form of social status in a world where those things were otherwise scarce. The same intelligence and organizational capacity that made Tavon White able to run a detention center from a jail cell could have made him a manager or an executive or an entrepreneur in a world where those paths were genuinely available to young black men from Baltimore's most depressed neighborhoods. They were not available in any meaningful way in the world he actually grew up in. And so the organizational capacity went somewhere else. That argument does not excuse what the BGF does or what Daryl Anderson did on Elmora Avenue. It explains the pipeline. Jenny Sherd's life was worth exactly the same as any other life, and the fact that the machine that killed her was built on the wreckage of institutional failures going back decades does not make her any less dead or her mother's grief any less permanent. But understanding the pipeline is necessary if you want to understand why the Public Enemy program worked and then faded, why the conviction of Anderson and Fallon did not stop the next shooting or the one after that, and why the demolition of the Baltimore City Detention Center did not end the BGF's influence over Maryland's correctional system. You cannot arrest your way out of a problem that is structural. You cannot name enough public enemies to empty the pool that creates them. The machine runs on conditions, and until the conditions change, the machine keeps running, and the names on the press releases keep changing, and the churches keep filling up with people who came to say goodbye to someone who was just sitting on a porch. Rachel Williams visits her daughter's grave. That is the final fact of this story, and the one that no legal proceeding has changed and no sentence has addressed. She lost her fourth child, her baby, the one she called special, the one who could walk up to you when you were angry and hug you until you forgot why. She lost her to a man who had been convicted 4 times and released 4 times, and who was standing on Elmora Avenue because the system had decided 4 times that it did not need to fully apply the consequences it had the power to apply. Sierra Williams is alive. She has a scar on her skull and memories of the night she was shot in the head on a Baltimore porch. Her mother watched her bleed on the concrete and was told to prepare for the worst, and somehow she is still here, still carrying what that night put in her body and her mind, still getting up every morning in a city that cannot fully protect its people from the machine it has allowed to operate inside its neighborhoods for decades. Michelle Hitchens died 3 weeks after she was shot. She was 51 years old, and she was shot in the arm on a summer evening on someone else's porch, and the wound that looked manageable killed her anyway through the body's own response to violence, through the embolism that moved through her bloodstream weeks later and stopped her heart. She was there because she was there. She had nothing to do with any of it. She was just sitting on a porch on a summer night in East Baltimore, and she is gone. Darrell Anderson flipped off the state's attorney in open court at his sentencing. Middle finger, held there, no remorse. That image is the final image of his freedom, if you can call what he had before the sentence came down freedom. It is the gesture of a man who understood at that moment that the transaction was complete. The system had him, he had his. The deaths were done, the sentences were handed down, the press conferences were over, and he extended his middle finger at the woman who had prosecuted him and held it there until the bailiff moved him. He is serving life in Maryland. He will die there. The machine that made him is still running. The second shooter is still out there. Jenny Sher's mother is still visiting a grave. That is the accounting, all of it. The 20 days on the run in the Birmingham apartment, and the bulletproof vest, and the 20-day manhunt, and the 4 convictions, and the 3 murders in the public enemy program, and the demolition of a detention center, and the 12-year sentence for Tavon White, and the life sentences for Anderson and Fallon, and all of it. That is what justice looks like in Baltimore. And the city and the machine inside it keeps going.